What a world we live in, chat. For the past 8 years, Dynamo has been absolutely abysmal, seeing next to no use and being a joke of a weapon. And in one patch, Nintendo finally decided that they like to give low tiers buffs that they actually need to be good, and just totally shifted everything. Now Dynamo's at a spot where within one day, people are now talking about if this weapon is overpowered, which feels just very strange. That said, I gotta say, if you're ever curious what S1 Dynamo felt like, we're pretty close to it at this point, so this is a good time to go and experience it, whether you're a fan of the weapon or not. But yes, for those who are tuned out of the scene, we really are talking about if Dynamo is too OP right now. It doesn't really have much to do with any of the new mechanics. In this case, we're mostly just going to talk about the changes the weapon got. Its maximum damage range of a horizontal flick was increased from a little bit over 2 lines to 2.5 lines, finally giving it the range to actually comfortably outrange or match the range of most short-range shooters and other small weapons in the game. Which means, yes, the giant, slow, heavy weapon will finally outrange the short-range guns. It took quite a long time for this change to happen, which is a little unfortunate, but hey, that's where we are right now. The vertical flick also has a bit more kill range, but it's definitely less noticeable. It's still not really great at combat, but there are some times where the horizontal flick will get cut off and the vertical one can be useful, or if you're poking at a distance. The more impactful buff when it comes to the vertical flick is the paint buff, though. While not as good as Flingza by any means, Dynamo now looks like it has some of Flingza's DNA injected to it whenever it does a vertical flick. The horizontal flick is still better at painting, especially after this change, but if you have to paint from further away or are in a position where the horizontal flick just isn't going to cut it for painting for some reason, you actually can use vertical flick to turf a pretty decent amount. Which does help out on a few of the more narrow maps like Brine Water. That said, the horizontal flick output just, yeah, feels like S1 all over again. It actually turfs the ground quite a lot. You can get cooler very quickly now. It went from something that took forever to now it gets it in like 4 or 5 flicks, even without any charge up, which does feel kind of crazy. As compensation for these nerfs, though, the ink efficiency was toned back, and I can actually say the ink efficiency is worse than it was in Splatoon 1, but that's probably because they have to offset Ink Saber main being stronger in this game. Without any main saber, you now have a whopping 4 flicks on the weapon, where you used to have 5, with one sub of main saber getting you to 6, one sub of main saber will now get you back to 5. A main of Ink Saber main is still just barely enough to get you to 6 flicks, which is pretty good. However, stacking past that point is actually quite difficult. You need another 4 subs of Ink Saber main, or 1 main ability of it if you're using 2 mains exclusively, in order to be able to get a 7th flick. And if you think about being smart and just using Last Ditch Effort instead, Last Ditch Effort on a 6 flick build will only give you a 7 flick build. You actually cannot get 8 unless you use even more. So if you want to have enough ink efficiency to not have to worry about that problem, you are going to be dedicating over half of your build to main saber perks, which is quite a lot. Personally, I feel like the 6 flick build is worth it, and then maybe Last Ditch Effort, or just running other abilities is kind of what I think might be stronger, but it's way too early to tell. That said, I think 6 flicks are probably going to be what we see most people run. A main of main saber for 2 extra shots is pretty worth it. That said, Dynamo's ink saving capabilities are undoubtedly going to be one of the main weaknesses for this weapon. While it does paint a lot and it does a lot of damage now and has good pressure, it has way more downtime compared to other supports. Even compared to other ink-hungry ones like Dreadringer, the white ink frames and Ink Saber are even harsher than on that weapon. So it is really going to be something where you have to manage your downtime effectively and find ways around it. On top of that, Dynamo's other problem is its natural speed weakness. It is still quite weak to bombs or anything of the sort. And the vanilla kit is really the only one that gives you a tool to work around that with its sprinkler under itself. That said, I mean, it's still just kind of insane. I don't know if it's going to outpaint every support in the game, but in terms of painting range and paint output, it might be one of the best. Its slow speed and downtime do offset that, but in the right moments, if you're positioned well, the bursts of paint this weapon can output are ridiculous. This also has by far the best AoE out of any support option. I would actually say it's better than Dreadrigger. Though Dread is very close, the fact that this weapon can also threaten to one-shot you instead of just doing 90 damage means you can't really deal with it the same way you can Dread. While Dread has an easier time dealing damage than Dynamo and generally more favorable damage numbers, Dread is a lot easier to run down due to the lower kill time, and it has to have its entire weapon kit built around that. Dynamo, on the other hand, will just straight up kill you if you run at it too much, which is an amazing strength for the weapon. It does not really have that same problem. Instead, Dynamo suffers more at mid-range compared to something like Dread. The slow speed makes it susceptible to chargers, bows, rapid blaster, or pretty much any other anchor you could think of that's good right now will probably do good against this weapon, and even other mid-range weapons can do quite well against it, such as other blasters like range or other similar options like that. Typically, mid-range guns have some options, though even then, the AoE from Dynamo's flicks does give it good options, particularly into matchups like swords. Yeah, this thing is absolutely going to demolish Stamper's Zipcaster, by the way. Did that before, so be a little scared to see what that looks like now. That said, this has spawned some discussions that this weapon might already be overpowered before we've even figured out what comps would make it good. And I'm actually going to start by saying that there is one nerf I would like to see on this weapon, admittedly. 190p on the cooler kit is probably a little too low, and maybe even same for 180p on the Super Chump kit. I think plus 10 on both of those would be kind of fair. It does not struggle with cooler output. Even just playing the game normally, I've gotten 8 or 9 Tacticoolers pretty easily, and that's without looking into any sort of gear optimization, which means, yeah, this is going to have some of the highest cooler output in the game. And while I feel that is important because compared to other supports, this one probably has to be more aggressive than all of those, at least from what I've heard from other testing and top player opinions, I do think it still should be a little harder to get it than it is now. The output should definitely be high enough. In general, I think shorter range weapons should be able to get cooler a little bit faster, given that they have a bit more of a risk than something like, Pencil. But it is definitely noteworthy. I think that, really, Dynamo as a competitive weapon has a lot of good synergies with other options. I think Rapid and Bow are both good anchors for it, but I think the main challenge in the comp is going to be that typically you're going to need a faster weapon to pair with this thing. Usually, the support weapon will also double as your mobility weapon of the comp, but that is really not the case with Dynamo. If you run another traditional support, your fighting power is going to be quite a bit lower than you might actually want it to be. So the solution is going to have to be trying to find a weapon that keeps up enough fighting power while still covering for that mobility a bit. There is a very clear and obvious candidate benefiting from recent hitbox changes and slider damage changes. I mean, look at this, dude. Dapple was already quite good before, but I'm a little bit scared as to what this weapon might be now, right? So I feel like that's probably the answer, and then run it with another AoE midline or a sword or something like that. But at the end of the day, we kind of have to see. It's going to be hard to tell exactly how good this weapon will be in comp until we can figure out what will be ran alongside it. That being said, this weapon being a high tier or even top tier weapon wouldn't surprise me. Though due to the fact that it conflicts with Pencil pretty heavily, I don't think it's going to be the best support or anything like that. It will definitely be a gateway weapon to using comps that aren't Pencil stuff though, which is arguably something the game has needed quite a lot. That said, is it too good? No, I think it's probably fine. It's going to be annoying to learn how to deal with it, to prioritize bombs, to not run it down too much, and to deal with its big hitbox and just ability to prevent itself from being rushed down by short-range weapons, which is going to make it quite good in lower-level lobbies. But I think this is a weapon with plenty of flaws that people can adapt to and learn how to deal with. So it's not really something where I'm particularly worried about a lack of counterplay. There's a lot of options, and other supports are going to be pretty good at dealing with it just by their own toolkits. That said, I do think Dynamo blending in nicely is quite good, and between this weapon and Dreadringer now being a much healthier weapon given the Reef Slider changes, I think we're finally entering an era where supports can be a little bit more varied than just simple shooter stuff. If we can see things like Brella getting a tiny bit of extra buffs or Reflux, we could see a huge variety of support options outside of the standard short-range shooter type weapons that we've seen from things like Dually, Splatter Shots, and Mini Splatling. which is really exciting, honestly. Support has been doing good variety-wise, but this has been the one thing that's kind of been lacking from it. It's still been the same general archetype of weapon, just with different kits and attributes a little bit. These are entirely different playmaking powers and abilities in terms of support options that really give the role some variety. Overall, I just really like the changes they do with this weapon. And again, outside of just plus 10 on some of the kits to compensate for the dramatic painting increase, I think it's in a good spot. I really hope that other low-tier weapons start getting treatment like this one, because it has been sorely needed. One final footnote. The L3 nerf is a lot worse than I anticipated because of one simple reason. You cannot shoot and follow your own trail anymore in one burst. You now need two. I get that the paint was a problem, but I really wish it was like the paint at the end or it being slightly thicker. It being holes in the trail, that really sucks. L3 needs a lot of adjustments because it's been only good as a special spam weapon for a while, and I really hope this is one weapon that can see some immediate boost in the nearby balance patch. It definitely needed the special spam adjusted, but this was a rough way to go around it. I hope they give the weapon something better soon, because I feel very bad for the small player base this weapon has. That said, that's my thoughts on Dynamo. Do you guys have other weapons you want me to talk about in terms of their changes in this patch? Let me know, and I will see you all next time.